Welcome to the Shower Epiphanies podcast, where we explore your hidden thoughts and desires, revealing your greatest drop the mic moments. Now, here's your host, Art Costello.
Welcome to the Shower Epiphanies podcast. Today, I am honored and thrilled to have Lauren Griewski on the show. She has a really interesting background. She actually has been working for two of my favorite platforms, Instagram and Facebook. And I'm sure we'll hear about all of that. But she cares about people, and that's what really draws me to her. And she's got a good heart, and I think she's here to help us all. So with that being said, Lauren, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's such a treat to be here.
Well, I'm honored. So can you tell us your story? How it started for you?
Yeah, I'll take you back on just a brief journey, and then we'll probably jump more into it. But I always have had a heart for people, and I was the girl in grade school who the whole, classroom or recess would be talking or goofing off, and I was the one that everyone heard because my voice was usually the loudest, and I was maybe stirring it all up, that kind of thing. So I'm a social butterfly at heart. I always have been, and I grew up in a home that wonderful parents and a brother, an older brother, about 18 months apart. And in my home, there was a bit of addiction. And so that also, as a young child, set me up to be a leader. And in a lot of ways, I'm grateful for the journey that my parents came into this lifetime with, because it's taught me to be who I am on my path. And so naturally, I'd always been someone who had taken charge and can see clearly through any sort of fluff or chaos, because I had to manage through it at a very young age in my home. And so as I, went through grade school, was always an athlete, always a social butterfly. I graduated from university. I grew up in Michigan and went to school there. And I set off for the big city, New York City. And for me, there was nothing that could keep me from being in what I call the heartbeat of the world. Every vein in every industry touches New York City, and I wanted to be at the center of it, experience it, and contribute and learn. And so I didn't have a job, and I didn't know anyone in New York. So I spent a summer at a sleepaway camp in Middleton, New York, which is about an hour and a half from the city. And I would get one day off a week from being the soccer coach and the middle school camp counselor, which, if we know anything for any of your listeners who have middle schoolers or can remember back to those days, hormones are running crazy. So that was a fun group to work with that summer. And I would interview in New York City. I would take the train into Penn Station, and I would take a change of clothes and change in the bathroom there and head out with my resume and a heart that couldn't wait to meet people and make an impact in the world. And so I ended up scoring my first job at Nickelodeon, which is a part of the Viacom portfolio. And that was where I learned business development and how to connect with people through humor and story and how to think like an executive. And that was foundational for me as I continued to build my career into technology and edutainment, which is entertainment and education at the same time. And really with an ethical background in being in children's media, I had to learn all of the ethics of media and advertising up front. And that is not taken lightly. And so I'm really grateful for that discernment in the work and the lens that I was able to bring to the work I did. So fast forward, about 7 years or so in New York City, Facebook called. At the time, it was just Facebook, and wanted me to come out and run this technology part of their business, which at the time didn't make a ton of sense to me because I didn't come from technology, but it was a huge opportunity, and I saw the promise at the time that Facebook had. And if you remember, this was back a little bit before their IPO. Wall Street didn't really believe in Facebook. Neither did really anyone else. But I saw the promise that Facebook had if we could get personalized marketing right and be able to continue to connect people at scale. I saw it as a holy grail of advertising and a lot of what it's turned out to be today. So it was also at a time in my life where I had just lost my big brother. My big brother passed away to a seizure. And so I had this thought in my system while New York was my home and I had built a network there. I just saw this lifetime is so precious, and that as opportunities come to us, it's our job to step into them if they feel in alignment. So I stepped in and I made the move, and I spent the next, 3 to 4 years building Facebook's business-to-business technology platform. And so that was, working with businesses in the technology sector. So these words may sound familiar. These companies, Salesforce, Oracle, SAP, HubSpot, Marketo, Infusionsoft. These are just to name a few. I worked with hundreds of different technology platforms to build Facebook's offerings, our go-to-market offerings. And then also they became, their own use cases in marketing, their own businesses. So I got to learn all the facets inside of how we built technology and Facebook's platform, from Facebook now to Instagram, WhatsApp, Messenger, Oculus, you name it. All of Facebook's portfolio, we grew and built that. And I was at the forefront leading that. And about 5 years into my journey there, I started to wake up to this calling that was more in alignment with helping people and not just businesses. And so I also was really clear that I had spent a lot of time working and numbing a lot of the areas of my life that needed to heal. And so I started to look at where I had given all of my value to my accomplishments, the company I worked for, and really made that at the center of that was my value. I had given my value to everything outside of me that I was doing. And I didn't consciously know this at the time. I just felt like, is this all? Is this all that we're here for in this lifetime? It can't be all that we're here for. And so I set out to learn from other cultures, from the Eastern side of the world, and from, Ayurveda medicine all the way through to yogic traditions and the history of many different, whether we call them religions or spiritual practices. But I really got to open up my spirituality and learn to connect with people in a whole new way. And so fast forward a couple of years of learning that and understanding how to work with people across the board, from the fact that you are valuable regardless of the work that you produce in the world. You innately come into this life as a valuable being, along with everything else that we can taste, touch, and feel, and those things that are even more metaphysical. But we are love and we are value at our core. And so I transitioned from Facebook and Instagram in January, and I've now dedicated my time to supporting people to developing businesses that are in alignment with who they are, and helping people scale those businesses, leveraging technology and automation and media platforms. And what's been really, really rewarding is for people who are in a similar situation to me, who maybe felt like they had to have external validation to affirm their worth, finding and experiencing that worth in every moment, regardless of their success. And that success can be a part of that as well, but that doesn't change who they are and the value that they bring in the world.
The need to have closure in any given situation is sheer human nature. And when it comes to romantic relationships, this desire skyrockets. Has your previously failed relationship left you in immense pain? It's not uncommon for people to shy away from a new relationship after their first one fails miserably. The fear of the unknown makes them hide in a shell to prevent any future heartbreak. Relatable? Despite wanting to love and be loved, you can't take the plunge if your mind and heart are still locked somewhere in the past. Maybe you aren't aware of the power of releasing the past, or perhaps you don't know how to do it. Art Costello in his online course teaches the art of moving on from bad places to happier, more stable ones. This course can change your life for good, helping you beat all kinds of negativity on the road to eternal bliss. Sign up now before the gloominess gets the better of you at expectationacademy.com.
Awesome story. I mean, just really awesome. And my head is spinning with questions. My first one is, and I don't know that it's so much a question as a statement. I want to see how you react to it. I think your journey to self-awareness started when you were younger and a little girl. And it starts with a mindset of openness, open to the possibilities. I call it that I say that I believe in the possibilities of everything, because since I was 9 years old, that's for me, that's how I've expanded my life and done the things. And if you follow that path, the journey will lead you to where you're supposed to be. I've been in businesses, made a lot of money. I've had no money. I lost my wife to cancer and those things, and it wipes you out. But yet it builds a resilience in you to keep going. And I'm asked often at my age, why are you not retiring? Because my mindset has been, since a little boy, that I'm not going to ever retire. I'm going to do what I do. And I see that in you. And you just followed the path that has been set out for you. And I don't call it predetermination or predestination or anything. You just followed the trail, the path. And you could have moved off to the left, the right, off of that path, but you always come back to that path when you are open to it.
We do. And I think you're right when you say that as a young soul in this lifetime, I was self-aware and circumstances supported me in being self-aware. I didn't really have a choice. And so the beautiful part about that is that I can relate back to that young girl really quickly in any moment and always check in. Like, how is she? What does she need right now? And that's been some of my own spiritual work and conscious awareness that I continue to stay committed to, because it allows me to connect to other people and their young child.
Yeah, in expectation therapy that I do, because I believe that the seed of expectation is just powerful in our lives because it was in mine. And that's my truth. But I think that when you have this expectation in you and you look at it through identifying the things in your life, and that's what you're doing, because the first step in my program is identifying. And I don't mean surface of identification. I mean digging way down deep inside you and really finding out who you are. And I think you do a lot of that kind of work, don't you?
Absolutely. And I do all of that work with the people that are my clients before we go into any of the business.
Yeah.
The growth comes, the money comes. We're not worried about that. That we can do. Technology helps us do that, but it's about transformation. It's about uncovering the deep-seated areas of our lives that either keep us stuck or that we're too afraid to expose because it's so powerful.
Fear kills. Fear stops people in their tracks every single time. I used to say that I was fearless until somebody asked me this question. They said, if I strung a wire across the Grand Canyon, would you walk across it without a net? And I said, no, I got fear. I got fear. But, it's when fear sets in, and some people are paralyzed by fear and they fear almost everything. They don't step outside themselves ever because they're afraid of what other people will think and all that, which has a lot to do with how they expect. But we can go into that another time, because I love your story. And what I loved about your story is you taking off to New York. I think I've done like about 60 interviews with people right now. And the people who step outside of that fear and just go it alone seem to just have this really great mindset of not letting things bother them, not being afraid of things, and they just charge forward. And I think that that's key into your development of becoming who you are, is to step outside of yourself like that.
Yeah, what's interesting is that I remember the day I was on my way to one of my classes in the university, and my best friend was one of my roommates at the time. And I said, we need to stop at this FedEx store, Lowe's, or whatever it was that had a fax machine. And she's like, what are you doing? And I was faxing them this application to work at the summer camp. And she's like, where is that thing? Like, what you do is, I don't know, but for some reason I just, feel like I have to do this. And lo and behold, then I got that job, and everyone, I graduated, straight A student, class president, captain of the cheerleading squad, head of the sorority. Like, everyone's like, what? You can walk into any job you want. And I just didn't feel like the thought of walking into any job that was just like, it didn't excite me. It almost was harder to stay in the mediocre for me, like in what I knew in my soul was mediocre, than to say, no, I won. And then this is, I say this humbly, I got Counselor of the Year at this summer camp. And I think a lot of it was, these were kids who went to camp together their whole lives. These are residential summer camps that it's like a whole part of their development. And then once you're a camper, you're a counselor. And I had never done that. I was a newbie. But I think a lot of it was that I would take these middle school girls and they'd be freaking out about a guy and I'd say, let's go on a run. Let's go run today 3 laps around the lake. And then let's talk about it. Because we got to move the energy. They got to feel accomplished. They got to set in themselves like, I can do anything. And my worth is more than some guys that are joking with me because we're middle schoolers and have nothing better to do. Well, you have a lot better to do. And so I think in me has just been this sense of adventure and journey and really listening into, like, of my options, which one feels right, even though I can't see it. And I will tell you, fast forward 15 years into a career, I took a trip to India in December, and coming back again, I was in the airport in Doha, and my brother speaks to me in the colors of blue and gold because we're huge Michigan fans. And I get off the airplane in Doha, and there's a woman with a Michigan sweatshirt on. And I'm kind of like fluffing it off, it's like, Michigan, everyone, it's everywhere, right? So I go to get a coffee with my friend that I traveled with, and I had, for some reason, I wanted 2 straws in my coffee. I don't know what it was. I thought nothing of it. I pulled the second straw, and it's a blue straw, and the one I have is Jell-O. And it was in this moment, and I was in my mind, and I was really navigating through this idea of, like, do I go back? Do I go back to Facebook when I get back? Like, can I go back? And I couldn't. And it was my brother saying, it's time and you're going to be just fine. And it was time. And I don't know. I still don't know. Right now I'm called to do this work, and that's what I'm doing. And I'll continue doing this work until I get the call to do the next thing. And it feels more fluid now, even like the changes don't feel as abrupt's the wrong word, but making a big shift from a company I worked for 7 years and had built, quite a bit of goodwill throughout that. And within, all of the different executives I worked with from a number of different companies, it came to me was that I'm not losing anything. I'm just stepping into what's next.
Yeah. I mean, and think about this. If you built all that goodwill, it will come back to you if you need it, if you want to call on it. And it can come back to you in many different fashions. It may not be at Facebook or Instagram. It may be that somebody that you have created this goodwill with goes somewhere else and can really catapult you into something else. I find that a lot. When you put out good vibes come back. It just does. The other part that I'm really tuning in with you is that you listen to your gut. You listen to that inner soul. And that's another thing that people do that they don't listen to. And at the New Media Summit, I talk to a lot of people who are new to the business of podcasting and new to just even learning, haven't even got their podcast yet. And I just tell them, you got to follow your gut. And, just because somebody does something some way doesn't mean you have to do it that way. You can do it your way, because sometimes your way is so authentic and so real. You feel so comfortable with it. A lot of the things I do buck what the normal podcasters do. But, I just do it because I'm living for me. I don't live for other people. And I think that when you live to the expectations of others, you're never satisfied inside. And your true blessings that you want to bestow on the world don't come out. Even when you work for big organizations like Facebook and Instagram or IBM, it doesn't matter who you work for. When you start letting your inner self flow, your creativity blossoms, and you can bring new ideas to a company they have to learn to be open to those new ideas, because your employees are your backbone of your business always. And customers and employees, the two most important things in business.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the other thing that, whether it's companies or organization in general, that we are now becoming a more conscious humanity. We are, which means people are healing. And what I found is that these companies, a lot of times, and in my experience, and I believe we attract what we need as our lessons and as our teachers, but I had no boundaries. I worked from sun up to sundown, and if I could work in my sleep, I'd do that too. And so that's the expectation I started to set for people around me, to expect for me to always be working, because that's how I showed up. And when I started to heal, when I started to mourn and grieve the loss of my brother in a really meaningful way that allowed me to also be with some of those feelings. And then I started to heal some things around, my own self-worth and my own value systems that I had kind of gotten out of whack over the years. When I started to do that work, I recognized, wow, I have no boundaries when it comes to my time or how much work I sign up for, or, you name it. And so as I started to create those boundaries, everything didn't even align in the same way anymore. And so the reason I bring this up is because companies will take whatever it is you're going to give.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to create the boundary for you. We have to do that work. We have to continue to be committed to our own self-development. We have to be willing to say, my health comes first. My sanity comes first. My family comes first. My joy in this lifetime and my connection to love comes first. And it's really easy.
That's you living to your core expectations. When you set your core expectations of what you want out of it, that's why it's so important what I preach, because when you set those core expectations and you live to them, it changes you. It really absolutely does. And it's not about being selfish. It's about self-care. It's about taking care of Lauren and Art and being who we're supposed to be. Because if you live outside of it, you're not. You're just not,
Well, I think it all comes back to being able to hear that internal compass, that internal voice, because from a place of self-care and non-fear, we're not chaotically trying to survive, which is what happened. In my case, I got lost in that. And my soul woke me up and it said, this isn't going to work anymore. There are things that you need to be guided to, and you need to be in self-care around in order to hear.
Has anyone ever inspired you to discover a happier, healthier, and more fulfilled you? It is a magical experience, isn't it? Inspiration is indeed very powerful, yet it's often undermined. It can lift you from the ground to the sky in no time. Have you ever thought about returning the favor by inspiring the people around you? If you don't think you have it in you, we have good news for you. Art Costello's online course has everything you need to learn to supercharge yourself and shape your character into a powerful personality. Get ready to discover your strengths and unleash the creativity within. Don't believe it? Check it out yourself by signing up for this life-changing course at expectationacademy.com. That's expectationacademy.com.
What was great about you, though, is that you're open to it. You listen to it, and so many people don't. They don't listen to it.
I had an incredible mentor who said to me once, some people choose to have death by 1,000 paper cuts, which is, it's like every just cuts a little bit more and blah, blah, blah. And then over time, you're just kind of cut up everywhere, and you don't even know which ones are more important or really severe, and that's just it. It's like the slow kind of over time. And I say that there's this layer of stress also that exists inside of a lot of these high pressure environments. And it's this idea that we become actually addicted to the stress so much. The science behind it is that we become so addicted to this stress, we actually are not able, our body doesn't know how to rest anymore. It's like we're constantly on the battlefield of life, or we're constantly worrying that we're going to get eaten by prey. And these are like, our animal brains. But to the point about self-care, we don't have to live like that.
You're the fourth technology lady, woman, person that I have met who has expressed this pressure burnout kind of thing that happens and have awakened to it from two Google executives. I mean, they express the same exact burnout and have left, and now they're doing different roles now. They've taken on other stresses that I went, whoa, okay, you went from frying pan back into the fire, but that's their choice. I think you've taken a more soul searching, more spiritual path out of it from it.
Well, I will say the stress serves because it distracts us from, and I don't know these women, so I'm not relating to their story, but in the environment, in the culture of these high pressure environments, it serves because it keeps us distracted. Mm-hmm. So we don't have to be with some of the things that are really hard to heal. And I will say, my first 3 months, like out of the working world, I slept, I rested, I cried a lot. I still have an incredible therapist. I had coaches. I really was like, you know what? I'm going to be with these things that scare me the most, because otherwise they just are like the root. They're my foundation. My foundation feels messy, and I haven't looked at it in so long because I've been busy. And the busyness served. I didn't have to look at it.
Yes, it does. Let me ask you this question. How did you grieve the loss of your brother? Did you dive into work?
Yeah, absolutely. Totally.
Yeah, because when I lost my wife, I dove into alcohol, which I hadn't done very much of, but I'll bet you I consume more beer than they sell at a Green Bay Packers game in a week. Yeah.
And, I say we get to honor the things that we used as tools to numb, because in some ways that had us be who we are today. Like in so many ways, I honor sort of the dark nights of the soul that sometimes come to us because they teach us, they give us contrast and perspective.
Yeah, and I agree with that wholeheartedly, because out of the ashes, I rose and really now finding more happiness and purpose than I've ever found in any I've always owned my own companies, so I've not really ever worked for anybody except one time in my life. And, I've found more joy and happiness in doing what I'm doing now, helping other people, than I've ever found before.
Beautiful.
And I just love it, because it fulfills the soul so much that the money doesn't matter. It's just about being this happy, loving, caring person. And I love people. Meeting people and doing these things, I get to meet 8-10 people a week on Zoom, and we record these podcasts, and we dig deep into their souls sometimes. And sometimes it's hurtful for them. Sometimes it's beautiful for them. But I always leave people feeling better about themselves. So
beautiful.
That's my gift. So,
on unearthing the jar, right? I tend to think sometimes that like all of our stories or the areas we go, we take a lid off a jar, but it doesn't mean everything just comes out. It's not all like a Jack in the Box everything. Right? Sometimes it's like, wow, like you'd use a jar. Like I used to think of it as like a treasure chest at the end of my bed. And I'm like, wow, I'm just pulling out a toy I haven't seen in years. I don't even know what to do with it. Like, does it make noise? Does it roll on the floor? And so much comes back that it's in the unfolding, it's in the discussion, it's in being authentic.
Yeah. See, I call it the process. It's all a process, it's the process of living. When you believe in the possibility of everything, everything becomes possible, and there's no limits. Your life is limitless when you go ahead, and if you release the stuff that's just holding you back and stop worrying about what other people think of you or what the things that you fear, and you start just becoming a doer. When I speak at high schools, I always tell the kids, become doers. Stop talking about it. Just do it.
Right.
And then go make doo-doo all over the earth. Wow. They laugh, they think it's funny, but it's true. Yeah.
The other thing I'll add to that, Art, is I call it imperfect action, which is, everyone's like, oh God, I can't take an action because they won't do because they're too afraid. So I use the word imperfect action, which if you break it apart, it actually says I'm perfect.
Yeah.
And we are.
Uh-huh. As long as we're living authentically, we are perfect.
Yep.
We're living as who we are supposed to be.
Absolutely.
I know that you've studied all kinds of different cultures and religions and all that. And I don't mean this in a religious sense of the word, but where does faith fit in your life?
Yeah, great question. Great question. And it's a question I'm with often, actually. I grew up in the Christian church, and I took a trip to Europe and did like 16 different countries and, was able to be exposed. And this was back when I was 21, 22 years old. And gratefully, I was exposed to religion and how it evolved over time. And I sort of saw the doctrine of the rules more as a way to control society. And it opened me up to, these are just rules that have been kind of created and passed down, and government, like religion was really government. And then I started to study much more around Hinduism and Buddhism and you name it, like tons and tons of different religions. And what I found was that we all have sort of this center God, this center higher power, and then some different symbols of the perfect man or an enlightened man or, Jesus, Buddha, you name it. And what's interesting is the way I see it now is what Jesus had available to him, we all also have available to us. So who am I to not live into what my soul and my purpose and my calling is in this lifetime? Okay. So I see definitely there's a higher power. But I believe that when we leave this body, this container, we don't die. Our soul changes. There's other journeys that we're on, other lifetimes that we exist in. But I believe in the eternity of our existence. And that I really believe that we're all one. I really believe that we are all from the same source. And so in that, when I'm connected and when I see my fellow friends, I call everyone friends, whether I love them or can't, my ego by them. But we're all in our journey just trying to do our best. I really believe we're all just doing the best we can with the gifts, with the things we haven't healed, with the things we are healing. And when I can see people and set my judgments aside, that's how I experience God.
Yeah, I have very similar views on spirituality, and thinking and hearing you talk, I'm thinking back when I was in college, one of the things that enlightened me because I grew up in a Catholic family, but I wouldn't call us practicing, my parents, the way that church went for them is 8:00 Sunday morning, you drove the kids to church and you opened the car door and you said, we'll pick you up at 11:30 after the church service and Sunday school and all those things. And then we'd wait on the corner for them to get back and pick us up. So, it just wasn't very structured well. And when I was in college, one of the requirements for my world religion class was to go and experience what other religions did, how their services were. And we had to go to 5 services. So I went to a Protestant service and all that. And then I went to a Buddhist service, and I went to a Hare Krishna kind of service.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Yeah. And for me, I can't tell you how almost frightened I was. And I was, I had been in Vietnam and out of Vietnam, and I thought of myself as this fearless, tough old Marine, But when we started being told that I had to go to 5 different services, it threw this kind of fear in me, because as a Catholic, you're told it is the one and only religion. If you go outside of it, it's blah, And I soon learned that the language may be different, the rituals may be different, but the God was one. It was one God. And it opened up a lot of my world, it did. And I threw that fear. And it's interesting that you said about religious fear, that we have, because once you shed that and you get out of that doctrine and that dogma and start living, it opens up a whole different world.
Yeah. And the judgment piece, how you mentioned how this is the one way and the only way. And that has us judge people to be right or wrong based on their beliefs.
Yeah.
I remember growing up thinking, oh, that person's like not right. Should I be worried about that person? Should I try to convert them? Should I? And, I think it comes from a good place. I think people's intentions are pure. It's just what they've been taught, similar to you and I.
Don't know which direction you want your life to take? Are you sinking deep down into the pit of uncertainties day by day? So, what's the secret to leading a happy, satisfied life? It's taking matters into your own hands. But what if the matters in question are a total blur? Art Costello's Expectation Academy course aims to tell you exactly how you can get some clarity in your life. This course can be your savior on your journey to reinventing yourself. While you certainly can't plan your whole future ahead, you can definitely control twists and turns your life takes. So what are you waiting for? Sign up for this course now at expectationacademy.com. Get a chance to broaden your horizons and add meaning to your life. That's expectationacademy.com.
In my book, I write a whole chapter on how churches, government, advertising agencies all use expectations to control people. Because if you can control people's expectations, you have control and power of them. They give up their power.
Yeah.
Once you submit to their expectations and not your own. And I have a whole chapter on it. And it's interesting. I mean, salesmen for years have used the power of fear to control a sale. We don't much anymore because the dynamics have changed because we've become aware. But car salesmen, when you'd walk into a car lot, want to buy a car, oh my God, that car will not be here tomorrow. That is such a good buy. And I'm not coming off my price, and the fear of loss has controlled the early sales industry for a long time and the advertising industry. They want you to fear this product or this loss of it so you will go out and buy it, which is such a crazy way to sell.
Well, the other piece I'll add to that is the shame if that ensues without even a message in the word or the salesperson, but if you don't look a certain way or if you don't have a certain material good, it doesn't give you as much power. Or, and I think for women particularly, I can relate to this, but images of women growing up and thinking like, well, I don't look like that. Am I still important? Am I still lovable? And how that ensues beyond just the words and the actual salesperson. But the media has a lot of power in our perceptions of our own self. And are we okay?
I'll tell you an interesting story. In 1968, my family is in upstate New York. Mm-hmm. And my sister worked for Kodak, had a great job at Kodak. She said, I got you an interview with Kodak in their sales force. I went and interviewed. And the lady that I interviewed, when we finished, she said, you're a great person. I love you and all that, but you don't fit our look. Could you imagine if you said that today, what would happen? But she said, you don't have the look of our salespeople. I can't hire you.
Wow.
And I said, you know what, ma'am, I can't change how I look. I just don't, I can't help it that I'm a muscular, stubby little guy, Yeah. I'm 5'10", but she told me, she said, they like their salespeople to be 6 foot, 6'2", 3. And I said, I can't do anything. I can't go to the place around the corner and say, stretch me 6 inches, it ain't gonna happen.
Yeah.
But I learned from that experience and I went on to do things much greater and much bigger and, but I could have let it really discourage me from a lot, and people don't realize their words.
It's a great story. And, there's lessons to be learned in it, like when it comes to like what we look like and all of that. But the bigger part of your story is how you said, okay, I can't change me. And thanks, like that's not changing. And there's something else for me if this isn't it. And, You know what's interesting? I've been watching these shows lately, and I have to get to Africa because I am fascinated by the animal kingdom. And what's interesting to me is for a very long time, my initials are large, LRG. You know, I'm a strong built woman. I'm, 5'9" and 160 pounds. And my whole life, I thought I was too big. My whole life, I thought, I need to lose 15 pounds in order to, I need to be this size, depending upon what season it was. And a lot of it was messages that I saw around me, around comparing myself. And I chose into that. And, recently I've been watching these shows in the animal kingdom, and it hit me one day, like an elephant is not trying to be a zebra. And a zebra is not trying to be a crocodile. Like, they are who they are. And they exude such magnificence in their own species, and they all play their role. They all play their part. And yeah, it's really allowed me to root in okay, who am I today?
I think that that's very common amongst women. Mm-hmm. I really do, more than so men. And I think that, I was in the airport yesterday and I saw some, and in San Diego, I noticed people are either large or they're extremely skinny, and I was just thinking, it's just this look that they have. Either you give into it and you starve yourself to death to get this body, or you work yourself working out or running or whatever you do to get to this place. I have friends in Austin that are just bicycle riders, and bicycle riders, if you ride 100 miles every third day of the week and you do 300 miles a week, you are not going to have any body fat. In 108 degree temperatures, you're not going to have body fat on you. Or they just give up, and they just say, I'm going to eat everything I can and blah, 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 and all that stuff. But yeah, I've done work with body dysmorphia. Yeah, dysmorphia. That's it. So, and I just go, golly, why would you go and have your lips done where you look like a duck, anyway.
Well, I think a lot of it in our whole conversation, a lot of the decisions that we make come down to wanting to be loved and to belong.
I love that about you. In your bio, that was one of your first paragraphs in it, that we all come down what we want to be loved. And that is such a truth. It is a truth. The one thing that when I was at Harvard speaking to the faculty at Harvard, one of the speeches I had done there with the words, what every human being requires and desires is the need to be validated. Mm. And it's validated through love and acceptance and caring. It's a truth. It's a universal truth for every one of us.
It's what we're made from.
Oh, it is what we're made from.
We are made from love. The act of love making, or of, that's how we're conceived.
Very interesting. I love that. That's how we are conceived. When it's the truth between a man and woman, when it's the truth, that's really powerful right there.
Yeah, and the intention in procreation, what a gift that it is something that's also pleasurable and loving and connected, and it's what it's intended for. We could go in a lot of different ways with that, but...
You mean you're going to blow it away for a lot of people that it's not a recreational sport?
Yeah, it could be in some ways. It's not, that's a whole nother podcast. But just back to what we said, our need to be nurtured, our need to be loved. And one thing I keep saying to myself and with the people I work with, is you get to have needs.
I got to say this. I think for a lot of men, sex is a recreational sport. Mm-hmm. Women are more attached to the emotional parts of it, because I do so much work with emotional intelligence, and we need to shift men out of that recreational sport thing and get into the real depth of what you and I have just been talking about. That is another whole podcast we could do.
Yeah, it is. And, I've done a lot of work around my femininity, and I'm not talking about, look, I love the color pink and getting my hair done and my nails done and a fancy dress and all that. That's one part of it. But the part I'm talking about is, as a woman, being able to receive, being able to feel. Mm-hmm. And a lot of women, especially in the working world, we become masculine in our being in order to survive inside of the corporate environment. And a lot of times men now, as we see men, there's an unhealthy masculine that exists where it's not so much about holding space and being the warrior. It's more about being the hero, being the defender. And if you look at like our martial arts and jiu-jitsu, it's not to fight, it's to hold, it's to be strong. It's to be vigilant around what's happening around you, not to fight and create chaos and have an ego and prove that you're the best. No, it's absolutely not that. And I've done a lot of work around looking at, we all have masculine and feminine in us, and we both have the healthy and the unhealthy of each side. And some of my work in the world is being able to be open to receive. And that's vulnerability. And in nature, when you're vulnerable, you get eaten.
This is really, really interesting because one of the hardest things that I struggle with is receiving.
We talked about that a little bit before the podcast, the last time we spoke. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's extremely difficult for me, but I'm very in tune to my feminine side, my masculine side and all that. And I know it has been hard for me, sometimes living in Texas, which is such a rough, tough, you don't cry, you don't do this. And I cry at commercials. You show me a Budweiser commercial with the Clydesdales running down there with a little puppy and I'm butter.
Men in this world need to see that. Yeah. Men in this world need to be able to express their feelings and their emotions and to connect through it. And I think there's a huge opportunity for men to connect through emotion.
I'm all about the emotions. It's who I am. I'm probably 99% emotion and the rest is maybe a little intelligence in there.
Yeah, well, it's emotional intelligence is sometimes the greatest layer of intelligence. That's how we built our whole world.
Well, I think that one of the biggest benefits of being able to identify your emotions is it gives you a control over not only the words we speak, but the actions that we take. And for me, and I just finished a course at North Carolina on emotional intelligence with Dr. Frederickson there. And I'm telling you, I believe that once you can identify your emotions, whether you're a man or a woman, it sets you out on a path of really living a pleasurable life. Wow. Because it only takes an instant in your mind to be able to identify what you're feeling, which is huge in how you act.
Huge. And to go back to the grief conversation, I think grief is one of the hardest emotions at first to feel because it's overwhelming. It overtakes your entire system. And once I gave myself permission to grieve, once I allowed myself the space to know, like, okay, here it is. Thank you. Here it is. And if it's here, I can feel it. I can move it. It will come and it will go like the waves. And in some ways, it's sweet. It's so sweet to surrender to the grief, to say, thank you, God. Thank you, universe, for allowing me to feel this emotion.
Amen. Amen. Amen.
Love. It's the depth of love that we have for an individual that we long to touch or feel or hear. And that's what grief is.
Mm-hmm. Again, it's a process. There's a process to grieving. It's important to follow that process, to let yourself follow it. And it's different for everybody. And the time is different. It took me about 3.5 years for me to really come out. Honestly, I cannot remember the first 6 months. From the time she passed for 6 months, I really don't know much of anything. I'm honest as day. I don't know. I can't tell you. My kids sometimes ask me a question and I'll say, I don't know. I just don't remember. I can't even tell you who was at our funeral. I don't know because it's just blank, because I was so numb. And that's so odd for me.
Well, same thing like if you're in an accident, right? If you're in a system, has you black out so that you don't have to feel the intensity of the pain. Mm-hmm. And in some ways, emotionally, our brain does the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. You're right.
And that's why, I say we have to honor the things that we use to numb us, because at the time we needed Novocaine. We weren't ready to be with what was there until we were. And so if we can allow ourselves the space, and I'm not saying this was you, or that I experienced you this way, but so many times, I'll use food as an example. I was watching a video, and I just came back from Tulum in Mexico. And I was watching a video about spiritual enlightened weight loss. A friend of mine recommended it. As I'm eating a peanut butter rolled up, I'm like, this feels great. I don't know, whatever this is in my subconscious that's having me eat a peanut butter rolled up tortilla. And it was 11 o'clock at night as I'm lounging in it was so ironic, and how, grateful I am for the space to be able to not judge it, to laugh about it, to make fun of the fact that I'm watching a weight loss video. Might as well get the brownie sundae. But yeah, I think that the more that we can allow ourselves the space to be human, and to sometimes, nurture the parts of us in ways that, from the outside looking in, as we look back, were there other choices? Sure.
Yeah, it's amazing when you let yourself be what you really can become, and that's what I want the audience to take away from this. It's just live and identify the things that you want, and just let go a lot of the things you don't. We're getting close to our hour, and I wanted to give you the time to leave us with some parting thoughts, and also what you're doing, how people can get a hold of you. So you can take as long as you want to just fill us in on how they can get a hold of you, and what you got coming up, and whatever you want us to take away from this. Then I'll take us out of here.
Yeah, well, first, thank you, Art, for the space that you curate and for the audience that you attract. And thank you to anyone who's been listening to our conversation today. I hope that people found value and can connect to themselves through our story and our conversation. Mm-hmm. In terms of my work, I really feel like people who are called and led to work with me know. And what I do is I support people in coming home to who they truly are, and getting centered in what it is that they want to express in the world, to productize it in a way that shares their gifts and supports them to monetize and scale their gifts through technology and automation and all that good stuff, but also through them really feeling the freedom to radiate their juicy goodness in the world. So I believe that the truth of abundance is having more than enough. And we come into this lifetime with divine gifts, and this is where the receiving comes in. If we're willing to share our gifts, we're also open to receiving abundantly and provided for abundantly to continue to share and expand them in the world. So that's the work that I do with people. And my website, I think I shared it with you for the show notes, but it's soulexpress.com. And if people are interested in talking more about their situation or their dreams, you can schedule a call with me on my website. So I welcome that, and look forward to anyone that's interested in talking more. And then coming next year, I'm hosting retreats where we'll do much more of the work around aligning to our soul selves, and what I like to call going from soul vibing to soul thriving.
Oh, nice.
So that we'll have that to look forward to too.
Yeah, that's great. With that being said, Lauren, it's been great. I just have again fallen in love with somebody that I communicate with on this podcast. You just nourish my soul and heart and all that. And with that, it's been a pleasure. Everybody knows where they can get a hold of me, Expectation Therapy. I'm going to encourage you to look into Lauren's site. It's a beautiful site, and it's very concise and does what it's supposed to do. And I know that she can really help a lot of people on the face of this earth. So again, thank you, audience, for listening, and talk to you next week.
Thanks for listening to the show. Drop us your comments and questions with what you want answered on the show. You can subscribe on iTunes and Binge Network. You can also get more information on the website, expectationtherapy.com.